right? Yeah. Thank you for coming. So before I introduce Ariel, I just wanted to tell everybody that we're having the opening of New York City's only water bar next Wednesday night. This is our water bar, and this is one of the waters that we are carrying. This is from Romania, and it's deuterium depleted. Maybe Ariel knows about deuterium. I'll tell you the very two-sentence synopsis of deuterium. Our body produces it, but it produces it too much these days because of toxicity and in the wrong places. So when you drink deuterium depleted water, it helps to carry out the excess deuterium. So I have been ordering this from Romania, and I met the woman today, who's the woman that I order it from. And she told me an interesting story. She'd been trying to get pregnant for several years. At 41, she drank this for 1 month and got pregnant. And so when she came here today, she came with a little baby. I've been drinking water for about a year now, and we have other waters too, which I will talk about next Wednesday night. Here, same place, same station. What? You want another child? Another child? No. Who knows? 73? That would be rather miraculous. I take 2 months. 2 months. So Ariel is about the smartest guy I know in terms of holistic health, and maybe in terms of everything else about the universe. I'm always really, really happy to have him here. And he's going to talk about this skinning on fat, which is a really important topic, and especially I think in this day and age with ketogenic. Are you going to mention keto?
Maybe.
Okay. If we ask the right questions. I'd like to hear his opinion on ketogenic because it is all the fad now for weight loss, and I'd like to hear his opinion, which actually I've already heard, but I'd like y'all get to hear it too. So no further ado, Ariel Telleron, thank you for coming, and I'm going to move over to you so you can have the floor.
Thank you, Jane. Welcome, and nice to be here again in this jungly environment. I was expecting some jungle birds in there. I'm sure that these parrots will fly. And people just hear this testimonial, so they need to be in a cage. So, are you all interested in sitting? And
You want to turn the sound off for the birds? I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, there was a sound of a bird. I knew I was inspired by something. Wow. Even white sound can become colorful after a while. So, you have a chair?
I can say I'm going to hear better standing.
Okay, you can come here if you want. Because,
No, I might have to leave.
all right. So this topic can go in so many directions that you're welcome to ask questions, when I give you a chance. And it could go in any direction that you want it to go with regard to skin or with regard to fat. The reason I call this lecture The Skinny About Fat is basically a pun to use the terms interchangeably as they relate to each other, which means that anything goes with regard to the skin, and the same is true with regard to the word fat. And some of you have expectations that you came here to hear about fat and maybe about weight loss. It's not the intention of this lecture to get into the weight loss issue, which would take 3 hours by itself. But we might touch on it a little bit. I just don't want people to have the wrong expectation. And anything relates to fat will also relate to weight loss. So if we talk about fat that we eat, that's fine, that's a part of the topic. And if we talk about fat that's already in our body and what it does, that's also a part of the topic. But it could be anything. It could be fatty liver, which also relates to some way to the fat that we eat. So if people are interested in that, we go in that direction as well. What normally happens when I have a skin clinic, and that happens in many places, either during a lecture or during the clinic itself, a patient would ask me, "So, Dr. T, why do I have this skin lesion? I eat healthy," they always say. And I say, well, this appointment is only 5 minutes long and it's only about skin lesion. I don't really have time to get into the entire discussion as to why you developed this lesion. There are some lectures on YouTube, and you can just look them up and find out some of the answers to that. But they don't have enough with that. It's not enough to tell them this. They want to know more, so they insist on asking again. I really eat healthy. I'm vegan. I'm vegetarian. I don't eat junk food. I stopped eating white flour and white sugar a long time ago. And people tell me that every time, even after I tell them this is not the time to discuss your nutrition. They still want to expound on their wonderful diet. And I don't have time to ask them all the details of what they eat. All they tell me is what they don't eat. Right? When you say I'm vegan, I only know that you're not eating animal products, but it doesn't tell me anything about the health of your food choices on a daily basis. And I don't want to get into this discussion when I only have 5 minutes with a patient to remove a few skin lesions. But they still insist. And they are so proud that they eat healthily as they think it is healthy. But I just have to ask them one simple question, and immediately I can prove to them that their diet is not so healthy. And then they understand that they have to wait until we have a different discussion, either by a phone consultation, or maybe they will have to go on YouTube and find some lecture, and then they will understand what they're not doing right. So I want to focus a lot of today's discussion on what people should be doing to actually be doing things right. And I can tell you, if you go to the Whole Food store or to any natural food store, if you ever go to a restaurant, it's very difficult to eat healthy today when it comes to fat. Fat is one of the skin has subcutaneous fat in large amount. Most of the little ridges and bumps that people have when they dislike their own cellulite, or when they have areas of distension of the skin that is associated also with fat. All of that is subcutaneous fat. It's a part of your skin. It's below the epidermis and the dermis. Right below it, so it's microscopic, the thickness of the skin. You can barely see the skin. Most of what you see when you peel a person's skin off her body or his body is going to be fat. You will see it as yellow, as a yellow layer of rough-looking, unpleasing to the sight fat that is so well attached to your skin that it's really a part of it. And humans are pretty special in that. We are unique in that if I pull your skin off your body, you will see the fat on the inside of it as I hold it right in front of you. There's no fat almost attached to the muscle. So you can immediately see the red muscular apparatus of your body. It's not in our hand. In our hand is all of your subcutaneous fat. Some of you have a lot of subcutaneous fat, some have very little. And that fat is very difficult to get rid of if you're trying to lose weight. It's a place of preference for yourself to accumulate fat for future need. Whether you have that need or not, your body might think that you have a future need, so it stores the fat in that area very often. And when you try to lose weight, and your skin often, especially in this area, becomes loose in the belly, and you think that this is just skin. But if it's dangling as just skin, and you can hold it and you still have some kind of thickness between your fingers, it is not skin. It's still the remnants of fat that are there lingering, and you cannot get rid of those because it takes a lot of work. The body wants to store that fat there, and there are reasons for that. And we need to help it unless we engage in certain activities that will make the body not need to keep the fat there. That's why when you think you have loose skin, it's just more fat. But it's a different type of fat. It's fat that is a lot more reticulated, more loose, and that's why it feels like loose skin. So what is it about our diet that is destroying our skin and therefore creating disorganization in the actual dermis and free radical damage in the dermis, which starts skin disease? Every time you have a skin lesion, it's a sign of skin pathology. It's a disease. Your skin is supposed to be smooth and beautiful, as a baby's butt when you're born. And every time you develop some type of a ridge or a rough area or a bump or a discoloration, it's a sign that free radical damage has accumulated in the skin, that you have deposited within your skin certain toxic sludge, waste material, that has affected the ability of the DNA within your skin to protect itself, and also that has disturbed the integrity of your immune system. And let's be very clear. A big part of the immune system of your body is in the skin. It's almost as big as the immune system of your gut. And it's very important to understand why. The skin comes in touch with the environment. So it needs to sense what's happening, even in some ways more so than the gut. The gut has its own very elaborate immune system. That's another topic for a different lecture. But it's a very different type of an immune system. It's already inside the body, so the immune system's response will be different from that of the skin. The skin will tell us in advance that something is about to happen in the distant future. The skin is the harbinger of what's to come. And if we have a condition of the skin, let's say eczema or atopic dermatitis, those conditions, especially in children, are a sign of something that is going wrong with the immune system. And if we ignore the signs, there will be a very big price to pay when the child grows up to be 15 or 20 or 25. Because the condition that was supposed to stay on the surface is now entering deeper and deeper as the immune system fails to recognize that there is a problem that we can fix. Basically, we ignore the problem and we try to medicate it, to use steroid creams, to do whatever we can to eliminate the symptoms as the immune system is getting worse and worse on the inside of the body. And finally, 5 to 10 years later, even if the condition appeared to have gone, to have resolved, even then, when we are so happy to see the condition disappear, suddenly a young person is afflicted with multiple sclerosis or with diabetes type 1 or other severe autoimmune diseases. That's because we ignored what the skin's immune system is telling us, and because we're not giving the skin the necessary components or products or nutrients to help stop this process. So the skin's immune system is crucial for our overall health, and we tend to ignore it. We tend to damage the skin from the outside in numerous ways that I talk about in other lectures, like soap, like washing excessively with chlorinated water or fluoridated water, like exposing the skin to really hot water on a regular basis with lengthy showers, like putting creams and oils that completely disturb the natural oily layer of the skin. All of those things we do to ourselves, using deodorants and different types of aromatic products for smell, just perfumes and so on. We disturb our skin's natural health. But let's say that we don't do any of that and that we are pretty natural and like me, you take a shower no more than once a month, Just kidding. It's every 6 months. Never mind about that. If you are completely natural with your skin and you don't put anything on it, you still are damaging it from the inside in a far worse way. And that will have to do with what you put into your body through the mouth, mostly. Ignoring the importance of your skin as an organ that is not just protecting you from the outside, but it is also manufacturing thousands of nutrients for your entire body. Therefore, we don't want to damage it. If we see all of those lesions that we discussed earlier, those lesions are a sign that you have not taken good care of your skin from the inside and from the outside, and it's just a matter of luck where the damage will take place. If it takes place within the vascular tree of the dermis, you will see vascular damage. You will see red dots, for example, especially if you have a genetic tendency in addition to the damage that you have accumulated. If it's not the vascular tree, remember those red spots we talked about in other lectures? Those are the senile hemangiomas. Or if you have spider angiomas, those little tiny dots that are red but have extension of legs looking like a spider. These are also damage of the blood vessels in the immediate subdermis, the subcutaneous area. But if the damage is within the areas where melanocytic cells exist, melanin-producing cells, then you'll have pigmented lesions, lesions that are dark. If it's not those areas, you will have lesions that are skin color. If it is affecting the stem cells of the skin where growth takes place, then you will have rough and elevated areas or scaly or flaky areas. If it's affecting the sebaceous glands, then you'll have tumors of the sebaceous glands, like sebaceous hyperplasia or keratosis of different types, sebaceous keratosis. So these are types of lesions that are just a matter of luck, which area has been affected. And they all indicate that you have not treated your skin appropriately from the inside out, because you thought to yourself you're healthy since you are vegan, or since you are vegetarian, or since you are keto, or since you are paleo, whatever diet, or since you are macrobiotic. And each one of those diets has some type of claims to health, which might be in some ways correct, but maybe they don't reflect on what we should be eating according to nature. Nature should be the determining factor of what should enter our body and what should not some human who wrote a book, not some quasi-religious belief in a named diet that somebody has invented, thinking that he or she are emulating nature in one way or another, when really the only way to know what nature wants us to eat is to actually spend some time in nature. And most people don't do that today. Even when I take people 4 days of foraging in Wisconsin once a year in the summer, even then, we only spend 4 days and we cheat. We don't eat 100% what nature provides. We do other things because I know that the people who come will be traumatized to just be eating from nature. So I have to give them some extra food on the side a couple of times or 3 times so that they can make it the entire 4 days. We are so emotionally connected to what we are typically buying at the food store. So to be in nature would be at least for a month, 2 months, 6 months. Then you know what you would eat in nature. People are looking at me and say, wow, 6 months, believe it or not, just a few generations ago, your ancestors spent months in nature, and that's what they ate, what nature provided. We forgot. Nature for us is the aisles in the supermarket. And we think that we know what's healthy. So when you buy organic foods, and all of them are pre-packaged, do you bother to read the ingredients in great detail? Most people don't. They think it's okay because we are in a natural food store. And that's when we damage our skin, usually through fat. Fat is one of the greatest causes for skin damage. Because of the fat under the skin that I described earlier, that is touching intimately your dermis, all of the damage that occurs within that fat will transfer directly into the skin that it touches. Free radical damage expands exponentially. If the fat is becoming rancid, it will directly destroy the structures of the skin right next to it. The collagen, which is various components of amino acids or protein with other things, will be damaged. The fat within the skin, which is the lipid membrane surrounding each skin cell, will be damaged too, because, like I said, it expands exponentially into any fatty area available. And it will go even to the surface of the skin, which is made mostly of fat. So the skinny about fat should also be the fatty about skin. We are really enjoying a beautifully healthy fatty layer around the skin when we are born, and we need to protect it. Unfortunately, we don't. Because of tradition, because of habits, because of what we were told by different authorities 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And until now, we have these habits that we think are godliness in case of cleanliness, right? Well, after the shower, you're a lot dirtier than you are before the shower. If you count the number of pathogenic bacteria on your skin, it's far worse after a shower, especially if you're using soap and you destroy the outer layer of natural fat, natural oil of your skin. Look at nature. Have you ever seen a giraffe or a zebra using soap, enjoying the suds? Never. Do you ever see a chimpanzee or a gorilla shampooing with lots of soap everywhere, making sure that all the smelly parts are taken care of? They never do. Sounds funny, but we have to go to the basics sometimes to realize what's healthy and what's not. And when we are dealing with the kind of medicine that I have been practicing for 30 years, which is called functional medicine, I have to say that functional medicine used to be a lot more truthful to its origin in the first 5 or 10 years than it is today. It kind of got diluted. Initially, functional medicine was basically biochemistry. It was all about the chemistry of the body and how we can improve it, how we can tweak it, how we can eliminate the interruptions to our healthy chemical metabolism. And if we did lab tests, it was to see what's wrong about your chemistry and how we can fix it, while also recognizing what has caused this disruption in your biochemistry to take place. And what's the number one cause for disruption in our biochemistry? Our lifestyle. So functional medicine originally was supposed to be dealing with people's lifestyle. because that's the number one factor in leading to chemical changes that are unhealthy. What has happened is so many doctors wanted to jump on the bandwagon that it had to stop talking about lifestyle. Since when you talk about lifestyle, you are inevitably stepping on people's toes. Since they have their own tradition, their own beliefs, if you want to embrace the flock of all types of doctors, you have to avoid talking about lifestyle. So I see so many functional medicine doctors who are my patients, and I'm totally shocked to see what they eat on a daily basis. I just can't believe it. These are the doctors who treat other people using functional medicine as a paradigm, but there is no mention almost whatsoever of lifestyle. All it is tests and supplements, tests and supplements. Lifestyle is forgotten. That's why I refuse to accept functional medicine as it is practiced today. I want to call it conservative functional medicine. Go back a little bit to the good old days where we were just dealing with biochemistry and enjoying a healthier lifestyle or discussing it. Nowadays, all these diets have come anew. All those new books telling you what to eat and what not to eat are ignoring that original primordial biochemistry that is supposed to take care of our body and especially our skin. So when you go to the aisles and you buy some foods, some products in boxes, and they contain a list of ingredients that you barely read, and even if you do read them, they sound natural, but you don't think about the process that they went under. You don't think about the heat they were exposed to in the preparation. You don't think about the amount of light they were exposed to, or the amount of oxygen they were exposed to. You don't think about that because you just read the ingredients. And it's almost impossible to find a packaged product today that is healthy, that is natural, even if it says natural all over it. We have to go back to defining what's natural and looking at its biochemistry. So rancid fat in our diet is the most important component of the skin that damages our skin and prematurely ages it, creating spots and blemishes and rough areas and moles and growths and tumors of the skin, all of which can be treated to some extent, but the problem is still there unless you change your lifestyle and start thinking about what's written on the boxes as well as what's not written. The way it was processed, the way it was created for your convenience. And you always have to ask yourself, why does it have shelf life? What makes it stay tasting the same for months upon months of life on the shelf? I would not call it shelf life. No, it's really dead to begin with. And if you get something that's dead, it stays dead for a long time, believe it or not. Therefore, it looks the same, it tastes the same. Very suspicious. Even bacteria are not stupid enough to eat it, to be interested in it. But it's on all the shelves, and we trust it. So what should we look for? I'm not saying that all packaged foods are always bad. Sometimes you can eat packaged food. But you have to look for the sources of fat. You have to look at the grams from fat and see the ratio of the amount of grams that you get from fat versus the other sources of calories. That's the first step. And then you need to see what type of fats are there. Are they saturated? Are they polyunsaturated? Are they monounsaturated? That will be a good start. There's another step beyond that. But if you get to this part so far, I'll be very happy because you'll eliminate most of the problem. So let's say that something you ate had a total of 20 grams providing calories. And out of that, 5 grams are fat. You could say that, the 5 grams that came from fat are representing the caloric intake from fat. And then you have to see what percentage of that is polyunsaturated or monounsaturated or saturated. Is that clear? If it's polyunsaturated, you're in trouble. That's the ground rule. Polyunsaturated fats are a problem if it's in a package. Anything in a box containing polyunsaturated is a problem, and this is clearly written on the box. So if anybody has a box here that you want me to share, since I just came from the flight from the airplane, after being jet-lagged from 4 days ago when I landed from Israel. So, oh, you have a package, thank you. Okay, but this is just, let's see what they add. It has added fat, right? They try to make those seaweed taste better, so they add fat. Fat carries the flavor. So if you want to sell something a lot to people, you have to first get them hooked. By adding fat, you are getting them hooked. So this is seaweed. It's nicely organic, and it has organic extra virgin olive oil and organic onion and sea salt. Okay, so does it say that it's toasted? It doesn't say if it's toasted, does it? But I know the brand and I know that they toast it. Okay, so it is being toasted. So first of all, what type of fat is it? It's olive oil. So it's monounsaturated for the most part, right? Now olive oil is not 100% monounsaturated. It does have a very small percentage of saturated fat within it, and also a small percentage of polyunsaturated fat. So if you toast it, meaning exposing it to heat, the polyunsaturated component will get rancid, will get oxidized, but it's a very small amount. So generally, this is acceptable. But it would be better if you bought the seaweeds yourself, toasted them separately, and then mix it with some olive oil.
After you toast it?
Well, yeah, you don't have to toast it, you can cook it in water. Remember, toasting is also often very high temperature relative to cooking in water. So if you buy seaweeds and either steam them or just soak them in water, they will reconstitute, right? They'll become fat again and mucilaginous and easy to chew. And if you absolutely must cook them, you can cook them in water or steam them. And then, when it's already cooling down, you can add the oil at the last minute before you eat it. Now you didn't expose any of the oil to heat, or to oxygen, or to excessive amount of light. And you eat it right away, and you avoid all the trouble. Now this is not so bad because the percentage is small, but if you are a healthy person who says, I'm eating raw granola every day, and you think you're starting the day on the right foot that way, imagine what is being done to the food before it's served. They put the whole mixture, of which they will create the granola later. They put the whole mixture inside the dehydrator, the oats or some other types of grain, and the nuts, and the cinnamon, and whatever, maybe dates or raisins. They put all of it into the dehydrator, and it stays there for 3 days. In high heat, in 100 105 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Imagine living in that temperature. When New York gets to 100 degrees, you all cry about the sweat and you have 5 showers a day. So imagine the food being exposed to that heat of 105 to 120 degrees for 3 days non-stop. What do you think is going to happen to all the fat that naturally occurs in all those nuts and seeds? And it's raw, by definition, because it was below some degree that somebody decided arbitrarily then it needs to be under. So you end up with a lot of rancid fat entering your body, and it's even worse than eating some really cooked foods that don't have fat in them. Much worse. I'd much rather eat a lentil soup that's cooked than raw granola that is served straight out of the dehydrator. It would be better if they dehydrated only the non-fatty food separately, and then in the last minute before serving, taking some nuts and seed out of the refrigerator that have never been exposed to heat or light or oxygen, and sprinkle those right over the food that came out of the dehydrator. Now you are in a better zone. I'm not saying it's perfect. We'll talk about why it's not later, but it's still far, far better, and the cumulative damage to your skin will not be so noticeable. Okay? So just a minute, hold on to the question until I will have a breathing break. Okay? So these are ways to start making changes. So why is it that polyunsaturated fatty acids, which we find in all nuts and seeds, and also in many oils, most oil that are in the market today, even in Whole Foods, what's the most common cheap oil available? Canola, right? The product of the rapeseed. Canola is Canadian oil. It was made in a place where nobody would normally eat the product because nobody would live in Canada. Canada is too far north. Well, we're laughing, but nobody would even live in New York until we have the technology to sustain the cold weather during the winter. But in that cold weather, you can create nuts and seeds that are rich with polyunsaturated fatty acids. Why is that? Because polyunsaturates are liquid in relatively cold temperature. And this is necessary for the life of the plant. The seed has to stay with energy that will be provided for the germination process during very early spring when it's still cold. Otherwise, in those cold climates, far north, where the winter is very long and the summer is very short, there's not enough time for the germination to be completed in time to develop a mature plant that would go to fruit and seed itself again before the next season. So in those type of climates where humans never existed because we are tropical by nature, our blood is warm. We do not adapt to cold temperature unless we have a stove, an oven, unless we control fire, unless we have shelter. So very recently, humans have started residing in those northern climates because of technology. Until that point, only plants could make it. And those plants did so by creating seeds that contain polyunsaturated fatty acid, which allow them to be semi-fluid, not so solid. Semi-fluid, so as soon as it gets warm enough, meaning just slightly above 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, as soon as spring starts and it's not so cold anymore, At that point, the seed can start germinating early on in the spring, so it has an entire season to recreate itself. And that's why we have polyunsaturated fatty acids in canola, because it grows in the north. Nobody would have eaten it or would have even considered eating it. But marketing does its thing. And because it can grow in large quantities, especially after they modified it so that they could reduce some of the toxic uric acid within it, making it less of a rapeseed by name, although it's still raping your health. Now people are buying it because of the price point. And if you go to your natural food co-op or to natural food stores and you ask them, why are you selling canola oil, which is not natural for us to eat? Why are you not using olive oil, which comes from much warmer climate? And you'll see why in a minute. They will always tell you because of the price point. It's much cheaper, and nobody would want to buy these foods that are slightly more expensive because they use real extra virgin olive oil, which, as we know from all the studies on the Mediterranean diet, that olive oil is the least damaging of many of the oils. Coconut oil is also very good. It's also a tropical oil. So oils that come from the fruit in tropical areas, like the olives, or the palm fruit, or the coconut, even though technically the coconut is a huge seed, but it's a tropical one, so that it has very low content of polyunsaturated fatty acids. And those are the acids that are unstable. So unstable that it's very easy for us to steal an electron from the double bonds that create this polyunsaturated state. Why do we call them polyunsaturated? Because they have more than one double bond. The double bond, if you have only one of them, it's monounsaturated. But if you want it to be highly disorganized and fluid, not tightly packed and solid, you want to have more than one double bond, because then they cannot stack. Those fatty acids cannot be tightly together. They are disorganized because every time you eat, you add a double bond, you add an angle to the shape of the acid. The fatty acid will not be straight as it is when it's saturated, or only one angle when it's monounsaturated. Now it has several angles, so you cannot find a way to pack them together. And that's why they stay fluid, even when it's cold. That's why some of those oils, you put them in the fridge, they immediately go excessively solid. But they can even be solid in room temperature. If they are saturated, right? Saturated fat can stay solid even in room temperature, so they can be used as butter or as margarine. And that's why trans fat was so popular in the days, because it was solid in room temperature. But with regards to the oils like monounsaturated fatty acids like olive oil and palm oil, and even coconut oil, they're liquid in room temperature. But you put them in the fridge, they get solid right away. And that's simply because of the tightness of the fatty acids as they are lying next to each other. So this is how you get to have rancidity. When you have too many double bonds, and a double bond by definition is an area of excessive electrons. So you can easily knock one electron out, creating an abnormal fatty acid which is partially missing an electron, and therefore it is considered oxidized. That's one form of oxidation that is bad for us. The body will still use that fatty acid, it will incorporate it into its own fatty acids, leading to rancidity of our own subcutaneous fat. And every time you eat those foods that you think are healthy, and it's in every meal almost that you put on your plate. Let's say that you eat something as innocent as a yam. Let's say you cook the yam a little bit, but you had to make it taste better, so you added some oil to it. And now you're cooking the oil, which develops really high temperature, doesn't it? Much higher than water. Now you're creating new chemicals that never existed before in that are not supposed to be in our food. We should never eat them. So again, cook without the oil if you have to cook, and add the oil later and make sure it's the right type. That would make a huge difference in your skin. Guaranteed. It will prevent problems and it will prevent rancidity. But we have to also talk about what's in the fat today. And we have to understand that our environment, because it's so rich with fat-soluble toxins, most of the industrial toxins that are in the air and the exhaust fumes and all the agricultural products that are used to kill insects and to kill plants, all of them are fat soluble by design. They have to be in order to get into the membrane, the fatty membranes of the bud, or to penetrate into the walls, the cell walls of plants. And that's why they are fat soluble. And as soon as we expose ourselves to those toxins, and you can measure them, by the way. I can do a urine test that looks for 18 different families of organic toxins from the environment that accumulate in our tissue, especially in our fatty tissue. Looking at about 170 different chemicals that represent many other chemicals of the tens of thousands of chemicals in the environment. By testing for that, I can tell you what you are likely to have been exposed to inadvertently. You live in an environment that you don't always pay attention to. You know about exhaust fume living in a big city, but there are many other things that come in the food that you eat, the air that you breathe, and the water that you drink. And some of them are in the product that you put on your body, which do absorb through your skin. And those products have a lot of those fat-soluble toxins because they're designed to enter your skin through the fatty layer called the stratum corneum on the outside of your skin. And this stratum corneum consists of a combination of fats, free fatty acids, cholesterol, phospholipids, sphingolipids, sebaceous material, products of the sebaceous glands, and the cell membranes of the original skin cells that started the growth from the basement membrane up to the surface. All of those fats and oils are mixed together in a perfect harmony, designed to have a wonderful environment for the healthy bacteria of the skin, the microbiome of the skin, which is not less important than the microbiome of your gut. But nobody talks about it yet. In 10 years, they will talk about it. I've been talking about the microbiome of the skin for the last 5 years, and still I don't hear anybody else talking about it, except for some manufacturers of skin products. They are aware of that. There are many research papers about that. But nobody talks about it because how relevant is it? If all you have to tell people is to stop showering excessively and obsessively, where is the medicine there? Why would they have to keep coming back to see you? If you just give them a few really good pieces of advice, they might not need you anymore. Wouldn't that be wonderful? but you just need to change a few things. So this stratum corneum, the fatty layer on the outside of the skin, absorbs many toxins from the environment straight into your skin. When you take the shower or you jump into a swimming pool, all those toxins are entering your stratum corneum and absorbing into your circulation in pretty good amounts. So it's not just what you eat, obviously. So now you're exposed to all those toxins in the environment, and you eat all those toxins in your food, assuming that you don't eat 100% organic. And usually when I ask people, raise your hand if you only buy organic food, only. Nobody raises their hand, usually. Maybe 1 in 20 people, 1 in 50 people. But even they sometime will buy an avocado. That's not organic because it's not one of the dirty dozen, right? You know the dirty dozen, the clean 15. So, and those keep changing, by the way. You know, kale just made it to the dirty dozen. You know, kale. Yeah, it didn't used to be there, but now it's there. Why? Because of how it's being sprayed. Things change in how humans handle their food. So it's always risky. You might be eating a food that is considered not in the dirty dozen, but next year it will make it there. Are you happy to know that it's number 13? And you have eaten it because it's okay, because it was not in the dirty dozen? It can still accumulate a lot of toxins. And it's unpredictable because some areas in the field will be sprayed a lot more than others. So these are just averages. You don't know what you're exposed to. Some people live in the countryside, not far from a field of corn or soy, and they continuously inhale glyphosate, which goes right through your skin as well. They don't know it, they buy only organic food, but they still get a lot of those toxins in. So these are fat-soluble toxins, and they will enter your body through any which of these directions that we mentioned, and they will want to gravitate towards your fatty tissue because they are fat-soluble. They will need a place to accumulate. Initially, if you are exposed to them for the first time in your life, they will not have a chance to end up in your fatty tissue. Why? Because once they're in the circulation, they will find their way where? To your liver. And your liver will rapidly convert them from fat-soluble to water-soluble in order to help you get rid of them. The body knows when something is toxic for you and says, nope, I don't want this. It's poison. It's interrupting my biochemistry. It doesn't allow metabolism to proceed. It blocks my hormone, my neurotransmitters, my energy production enzymes are all being damaged by those toxins. They're killing me, slowly or rapidly, depends on the dose and the susceptibility and the polymorphism, the genetic susceptibility. So each person has a different level of reactivity, but we all recognize, even if we're not aware of it, that these are toxic. As soon as they enter the body, before they have a chance to make it into our fatty tissue, the liver will start working on them. Even the gut cells will start working on them because they might come in touch with gut cells when you ingest them. And they will start moving them through phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification, which are designed to turn them from fat-soluble into water-soluble. Why? Because that's how we get rid of them, through the bile acids, which are mostly water-based, and through the urine, which is water-based. So we have to convert them to water-soluble. And usually that would be the case in a natural environment where the amount of toxins are minuscule and when you just started being exposed. However, today, when did we start getting exposed? When we were still in our mother's womb. We already got exposed. As we know, in studies of umbilical cords, a lot of those toxins already are present. hundreds of toxins have been identified in the umbilical cord. So the baby is not coming pure to our world anymore. They come with the original sin already within them. But it's a sin of their parents, of their ancestors who created those toxins. It's not their own sins. They shouldn't pay the price, but they do. So in our environment, we get so much exposure that there are enough times when the liver is not able to handle those fat-soluble toxins through phase 1 or phase 2 because of reasons I'll mention in a minute or in a few minutes. And as a result, they start accumulating. They're circulating, and they're looking for a place where they can accumulate. And it has to be the fat. So if they go through the circulation of the subcutaneous fat, which has a lot of tiny capillaries of blood, they will see, oh, this is fat. We can lodge ourselves into it. So they go right through the membrane. They're fat soluble. They go right through the membrane of the endothelium, the cells lining the blood vessel from the inside, and they go from those cells towards the other side of the endothelium, and now they are in the fatty tissue. So your fatty tissue starts accumulating all of these toxins. So right now, if I had to eat a human, let's say we got stuck in a bad storm, and I have no choice but to eat some other person's butt. Okay, survival. Assume that this person is already dead, right? So that, I'm not killing that person to eat their. Although, if some of us have plenty of butts to share even while we're alive. So we can all survive just nibbling on each other's butts. Sorry about that. But make sure you don't cook it too much, If it has fat, you don't want it to go rancid.
Not if that in the butt.
So,
And boil it.
yeah, you don't want to boil people's butt. They won't be appreciative. So, anyway, the one thing I will not eat is their fat, because that's where all those fat-soluble toxins accumulate. So I would really have to eliminate all the fat, make sure. And when people eat flesh today, even when they eat organic flesh, healthy flesh, as they think it is, they eat flesh that contains a lot of fat within it. In fact, many of those diets thrive on that fat that surrounds the muscles of other animals. And in today's environment, it's impossible for an animal, no matter how organic it claims to be, or the farmers raising it claim it to be, it's impossible to avoid those environmental toxins that are in the food and the air and the water and the environment in which those animals grow. And all their toxins are also accumulating in their fat. So when you choose to eat animal fat, you also choose to eat whatever toxic residues have accumulated within that fat, just like it accumulates in our own body, even when we eat organic. You understand the analogy? We eat organic and we have all those fat-soluble toxins in our fat. And the same will be true for other animals that are presumably organic, well, even if they're organic just most of the time, I assure you that their organic nature is not so perfect. And sometimes they get sick and they are given something for their sickness. And sometimes there's other things entering their food just to make sure that they can make it, intact for slaughter time. And there will be toxins in their subcutaneous, most of them don't have subcutaneous fat. They're not the same as human in that regard. Most of them will have perimuscular fat. So when you eat their muscle, you also eat the fat that is in between their muscles. And that will be a lot of toxins coming into your body. And many of those fats themselves, depending on what those animals eat, will be very unstable. What's the number one claim of people who eat organic, free-range flesh, free-range tissues of the animals, right? The animals were free-range. What's the number one claim? Omega-3, right? Increase the omega-3 because they are grass-fed, correct? Now it's true that if they are grass-fed, they'll be much better, much healthier than if they eat corn and soy and other things that are given to commercial animals, commercial agriculture animals. But the omega-3 that accumulates in the fat, first of all, it will still allow fat-soluble toxins to accumulate within it. But second, omega-3 fatty acids are extremely unstable because they are polyunsaturated. They have more than one double bond. Most of them have two double bonds, but some even have three double bonds. Some. And that means that when you expose them to heat, and most people who eat organic flesh will cook it, right? They don't eat it raw. And correct me if I'm wrong, I just never ate flesh, so I don't know for sure. But I've never seen anyone yet in a restaurant or other places, and these are people who claim to be healthy. I've never seen them eat flesh unless it was heavily cooked, and usually in extremely high temperature. Correct me if I'm wrong. Right now, raise your hand if I'm wrong. I'm wrong?
Raw fish. Yes.
Raw fish. Okay, so there's maybe one.
Raw beef.
Oh, raw beef maybe? I haven't seen people really eat raw beef. But if they do, or even if they eat raw fish, what percentage of their diet is that? I mean, they can always hang on to, yes, once a month I eat raw fish, or once a month I eat raw beef, but most of the week, they cook their meat very heavily. And we're talking about accumulation. And sometimes it's in the oven, sometimes it's with oil. Now you're creating new molecules. We don't have to name them right now. This is going to be an easy discussion. I'm not getting into the heavy biochemistry for you. So now you're getting a lot of rancid fats because the polyunsaturated oils are so unstable and they're not supposed to be exposed to heat. So no matter how you're going to slice and dice it, whatever excuse you're going to make to yourself, when you say I'm eating grass-fed, look at how you processed it in order to make it available to your mouth, in order for you to chew it. And I'm not even talking about other issues like how do you even capture it to begin with. I mean, what spears and bow and arrow did you have to use to capture it from your fridge? Or to capture it from the freezer in the store? How hard did you have to work to actually obtain that? In nature, you would obtain flesh once in a while, maybe a rabbit or a bush baby once every month or 2 months if you're lucky. It's not always available. It's not so easy to obtain by just, entering the kitchen. So you would have to work really hard, and therefore, even if you decide to cook it once a month, when you finally find flesh, it would be a small accumulation. Your liver would be able to somehow handle that and eliminate any toxins, plus the small amount of rancid fat will not have a chance of creating long-term damage because the rest of the month you will only be eating nutrient-dense, antioxidant-rich, phytonutrient-rich food instead of the lies that we read today in the internet with all those health-promoting websites which tell you on the same sense that in order to have healthy skin, you need to have a lot of protein. They will tell you you need to eat a lot of protein, but they also say you need to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. They always say that, hand in hand. How can you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables when you eat a lot of protein? Those two contradict each other. You cannot do that. A lot of protein means that your calories are not coming enough from vegetables and fruit. And if they are coming from a lot of vegetables and fruit, there won't be a lot of protein. Not the numbers that they're talking about. So they are contradicting themselves just to sound politically correct. Just again, to avoid the issue of lifestyle, because anybody can say to herself or himself, I'm eating enough fruits and vegetables, right? You can say that to yourself, even if you only had one small salad a day. You can say, well, I had my vegetables. Did nature tell you how much vegetables you'll have every day? Or did you decide on your own what's enough? Because you had to fill up the rest of your caloric needs by eating lots and lots of proteins, because you were told you need that too. Or lots and lots of calories from fat, because you are so lacking in energy, which is lost just to the digestive process, that you need to get even more calories in your food just to go through the day. But if you go on a very low calorie diet, or even on a nutrient dense fast, which I put a lot of my patients on, my nutrient dense fast replaces fasting. It gives you all the benefits of fasting without the damage of fasting. Fasting can cause a lot of damage too. So you can avoid it by doing a nutrient dense fast. And people who do that,
What is that?
oh, what is that? Later. People who do the nutrient dense fast are only getting into their body anywhere between 600 and 1,000 calories a day. Those who get 1,000 calories a day are the ones who are really active and big people and muscular people. Those who get 600 are petite women usually. And they don't go hungry. And they have energy all day long. Why? Only on 600 calories? Because on a nutrient-dense fast, you're not wasting half of your energy on the digestive process itself. So 600 is the equivalent of 1,200. 1,000 is the equivalent of 2,000. You understand? Why? Because you're not wasting energy on digestion, which is a huge waste of energy. When you eat foods that require a large amount of productivity in the glandular organs of the digestive tract. And the cells lining the gut, which are themselves productive of mucus and neurotransmitters and other elements that require a lot of energy. So if you get into your body things that are already semi-digested, you don't need to spend much energy on getting them in. And you can literally fast while also getting nutrients, which is crucial for the liver. Now I'll tell you why. Because when those fat-soluble toxins come in with the fat that you eat, or through your skin, or through the air, when they come into the body, those pesticides, those insecticides, those artificial fertilizers, and they go first into the liver goes through phase 1, which is to functionalize those molecules. To functionalize them, they need to become themselves free radicals. They need to become very unstable and ready for the next phase immediately. The next phase is when you conjugate them, you bind them to molecules that are polar, that have a positive charge and a negative charge, similar to water. Now it can become water soluble. But if this toxin goes through phase 1, and it's now a free radical, and it's more toxic than the original toxin, only the liver can handle it, temporarily. The liver needs to be rich with nutrients that come in through the diet, rich with amino acids, and antioxidants, and sulfur, and methyl groups. and glutathione. And all of those nutrients have to be ready in the liver immediately to take over the product of phase 1 to make sure that they are neutralized and they don't cause damage. And now we use all of those nutritive compounds to turn those functionalized molecules into water-soluble molecules. Now they can go straight from the liver into the bile duct or into the circulation and into the urine. And that's how we get rid of those toxins, those fat-soluble toxins. So if we don't have enough nutrients, as in fasting, real fasting, what will happen to all those fat-soluble toxins that have accumulated over years and years in our fat, in our subcutaneous fat, right here, or in our perivisceral fat inside the body? What will happen to all those toxins? First, our body will get hungry, right? It will need calories because we're fasting. So what will be the first thing it will do? It will start breaking down glycogen, which is a form of carbohydrate, in the liver to make energy. But that would only last us for a day. After a day, we need to get another source of calories. That will be the fat. That's why people who are fat will last longer in a drought. In starvation mode, they will last longer. But this is not relevant to our life today. Nobody is starving. Even if you say to somebody, I'm starving because you haven't eaten for 4 hours, that's not real starvation. So in times of real starvation, you're going to start breaking down the fat that has accumulated under your skin, among other fats. And that fat contains in it already all those fat-soluble toxins that didn't make it through the liver because there were too many of them over the years, or because your liver was not nutritive enough to get them through phase 1 and phase 2. So they started accumulating in your fat. And after 10 years of that, 20 years, remember it's already in the umbilical cord, 30 years of that, right now your fat is totally not fit for animal consumption. Unfortunately, the animals that eat us once in a while don't know it. So they get poisoned too. Right? We feel sorry for them. So if an animal eats me, I wish to give them at least some clean flesh. You know, I want a wolf or a bird, an eagle or a vulture, you know, if they eat me, I want to at least give them some clean fat. But I can't do it because I live in modern life. So it's not fit for human consumption. Yet, this fat with its toxins are being released in large amount into our blood because we need to make energy out of them. So they end up at the liver because the liver has to create energy out of that fat when you're fasting. But what comes with that fat? All those toxins. Now, how are those toxins solubilized in the fat while the fat is going through your blood? This is something that most people don't know. This might be the first time you hear about it. In the blood, very, very small amount of fat will be free fatty acid. Free fatty acid will just float in the blood in very tiny amount, but they cannot hold onto fat-soluble toxins. They can't because they're not surrounding anything. It's just a string of carbons that are called fatty acids, and they're free and they're floating. There's no way for anything to dissolve in them because they don't constitute fat yet, since they are only separate chain of acids. So how do we carry those fat-soluble toxins in the blood in that case? Only by having sufficient quantity of fat in the blood to actually create micelles. Micelles are little globes, little hemispheres or spherical, spherically shaped oily compounds that can hold onto the toxins inside them. And those can float in the blood freely because on the inside they're oily and on the outside they're watery. Just like the cell membranes of our body, on the inside they are watery, on the outside they're oily. Just like oil on top of water are separated. So there is a separation, and those micelles are floating in our blood, and within them we have those fat-soluble toxins. So, which means that sufficient amount of fatty acids must enter the blood in order for fat-soluble toxins to actually start getting released. And this will only happen when you are fasting or when you eat a lot of fat. In those situations, temporarily, you'll be able to carry fat-soluble toxins through the blood. Does that make sense?
During fasting and when else?
And when you eat a lot of fat. Now, if you try to detoxify, you almost have no choice but to provide some fat to the blood, assuming you're a very skinny person and that you're still eating food. If you're still eating food that is mostly vegetables and greens and other nutritive substances will help the liver in phase 2, then you're not breaking down fats, so you are not able to release the toxins and you never detoxify. The toxins hold on to your fat. They stay there and you're not detoxifying no matter how much you claim to be doing detox. A lot of people say, oh, I'm detoxifying right now. I'm doing this program or that program, but they're not releasing any toxins because there's not enough fat in their blood to carry the fat-soluble toxins, to form those micelles, those spherical structures of fat. People don't know that. So the only way to do it is through real fasting or through nutrient-dense fast, where you get a small number of calories, so that you still are mobilizing your own fat and you lose weight that way. Then you get fat to come in, but then you also need the nutrients to support the detoxification in the liver, or you end up in trouble. What do I call trouble? Have you heard of the Herxheimer reaction? Right? You have to feel worse before you feel better. That type of reaction, where you feel I'm going through a detox, which means I'm tired, I'm bedridden, I have muscle soreness, I have a headache. These are the Herxheimer reaction when you detoxify. That's not detoxification, my friends. This is self-poisoning. When people feel worse before they feel better, they actually are engaging in self-poisoning. The symptoms are the symptoms of self-poisoning. That's because they are pathologically detoxifying. They are not going through phase 2, only through phase 1. I won't get into the reason right now. That's biochemistry. They go into phase 1, they cannot make it into phase 2 because they don't have the nutrients, because they're fasting, or because they're not getting enough nutrients, or because they're eating a lot of meat and not getting enough vegetables, enough greens. So these people end up with pathological detoxification, and they end up feeling worse. That is cumulative damage. That forms double bonds in the brain that cannot be undone. That's how things like tau proteins, amyloid beta, and the different amyloid protein that accumulates in the brain of people who develop dementia, and lipofuscin, which develops also into age spots on the skin and into pre-dementia.
What's that word you said?
Lipofuscin. Lipofuscin, yeah. These are the results of too much of this inappropriate detoxification process, pathological detoxification. It's all about the healthy fat and the toxins within it, and the rancid fat versus the fat that is stable and intact. How does the polyunsaturated fatty acid remain intact? By continuously eating sufficient fruits and vegetables, and I'm talking including spices and herbs. Don't think of only of 5 vegetables and that's it. There's a huge variety, and most people don't eat everything that they see on the shelf. They only eat the same 4 or 5 different foods that they're accustomed to making. So start getting variety and quantity. Then you can maintain your own polyunsaturated fatty acids that are already incorporated into your skin, and you can maintain them healthy, and then your skin will not go rancid and will not develop age spots and rough spots and red spots and dark spots and sloughing, scaling areas and cancer of the skin. All of those lesions will simply not happen because your skin will be protected with fat that does not have those rancid oils within it and that does not have all those fat soluble toxins accumulate, because those toxins themselves create even more free radicals and interrupt with the immune factors of the skin and with the circulation of the skin and damage metabolism within skin cells. Okay? So basically, you want to mobilize fat from the skin, the fat that makes you feel like you're overweight. You want to mobilize it, but you need to have all the nutrients to support phase 2 in the liver at the same time. That's why you cannot really fast without causing damage. And that's a big problem for a lot of people today. So if I put people through a detoxification program, I can choose to put them through a nutrient-dense fast, or I can choose to put them on a very strict diet. Very strict diet. That is almost too easy to do because it might be a mono diet, or it might just be consisting of specific things that they can recognize that would give them a lot of nutrients and good variety, but they will get a fairly small amount of calories. I have to give them fat as well. I have to put them on a fatty meal at least twice a day. So I might have them take 1 or 2 tablespoons of coconut oil or olive oil in the morning and in the afternoon, so that they continuously have enough fat, sufficient quantity of fatty acids coming in through the lymphatics of the gut and directly into the circulation, not into the liver. Because if it goes through the liver, at that point, the fat will cease to exist as fat. It will have to be packaged and the liver will do something else with it. But if it goes through the lymphatics, then it goes straight into the circulation, skips the liver, and it has a chance to serve as a temporary home for those fat-soluble toxins. Deliver them to the liver instead of delivering them to the brain. Because fat-soluble toxin that didn't make it to the liver will find other fatty tissues to go to. And our brain will be a target because it's mostly fat. And that's a terrible thing. I'd rather have my toxins in my subcutaneous fat than in my brain. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
At least here, it's not affecting my speech. At least here, it's not destroying my memory and my cognition and my sense of humor. But once those toxins are in the brain, you cease to exist as the person you once were. Because your brain is not functioning anymore. And you'll be the last one to recognize it. Other people will notice, oh, this person has become cantankerous, or this person has become impatient, or this person has lost their humor or their intrinsic happiness, because toxins in the brain are interfering with their mental functions. And sometimes we attribute it to old traumas and psychology, when a big contributor was simply poisoned in the brain. Permanent, covalent bonds that are irreversible. We don't want that. So we want to always escort those fat-soluble toxins to the liver for processing. So you have to have fat if you are going through meaningful detoxification process. Normally, you don't do it. But if you are going through 6 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 months of detoxification, you need to have all the nutrients for phase 2, all the antioxidants for phase 1 and phase 2, and all the fats, at least in specific boluses, to escort those fat soluble toxins that will inevitably come out of your subcutaneous fat, to escort them to the liver so it can have a chance of going through phase 1 and phase 2. So it can finally become a water-soluble toxin that can be eliminated through the bile and through the kidneys. Are you getting this? Is this important or what? This is crucial, but it's completely being ignored. I have yet to see people go to a practitioner who puts them on a detoxification program addressing these issues. And most people go through some internet programs and they don't know what they're doing. And that's one reason why so many people who claim to be bastions of health, waving the flag of veganism or vegetarian or whatever, and I can see the changes already in their skin and in their brain. By talking to them, you can tell that they're not functioning at the same octane they once functioned. They might not be aware of it, and they are so religiously devout with their chosen diet that they take it for granted, axiomatically, that this is a good and healthy approach to lifestyle, and they will not listen left and right. So this would be true also for people who take paleo or keto and so on into their own account. With a ketogenic diet, you're focusing on fat as a source of calories. This is not exactly what would have happened in nature, would it? It would happen in the human body under severe emergency circumstances. We can survive on fat almost entirely when there's no choice. When we are starving and the body goes into ketosis or ketoacidosis, it's because we mobilize all the fat in our own body to make energy. That's an emergency. In real life, in the jungle, where humans emanated from, in the jungle, we've never had a reason to starve because there's sufficient biomass all year long. You never starve in the jungle. There's always something green to eat or to nibble on. Whether you're sitting on the top of a tree and eating the leaves, or roaming the ground and eating the weeds, or the fruit, which sometimes come in season, or some of the nuts that come in season. There's always something, and roots, especially roots, can always be dug out and give you sufficient number of calories for their starchiness. All of that would preclude humans from ever fasting in nature. But we are not living in our natural environment anymore. So we need to find ways. So we have to still listen to biochemistry and say, what are those ketone bodies that we are using to feed the brain in a way that circumvents its need for glucose? Instead of feeding it with glucose, we feed it with ketone bodies. And yes, when the body goes through emergency, certain genes turn on and certain other genes turn off. And it could contribute to our survival skill in the future. It may have some benefit. That's why intermittent fasting is not so bad. In today's sick environment, it gives us a tool to improve a little bit. But if we go too far with it, we lose the potential benefit versus risk ratio. Now we end up with a lot more risks than benefit because we accumulate things too much. What's good for half a day or for a day a week is not necessarily good for every day of the week. Would you agree with that? It's just like sprinting. Sprinting is really good, more than running a marathon. Marathon is terrible. But exerting yourself significantly for a short time is very good for us. It triggers all the right genes to be expressed in our body. It's healthy to have short-term stress and then we can be lazy again. That's nature. But if we start running marathons or doing this stressful activity and running sprints all day long, we end up broken down and we die just like that person at the end of the original marathon died. How could we emulate that as a healthy activity when the first marathon ended in the death of the person who ran it? So emergency situations should never be confused with long-term survival, long-term health, and longevity. They're not compatible. And if we adopt an emergency situation like a ketogenic diet, assuming that it's true ketogenesis, most people who claim to be keto are not really keto. If you look at their diet, you see there's no way that they are in ketoacidosis or in ketogenic diet. They're not at all ketogenic. They just say it because, well, it became another seller in the market. And it's a trend, it's a fad. So just like the Atkins diet was also ketogenic, it was a fad. And everybody bought something that had the word Atkins on it. But then they got smarter than to use the name of a person who might die suddenly. They got smarter and they gave it a name that will survive a person who died while being on that diet. So with diets like ketogenic diet, most people are not really engaging it, they're just thinking it, that they're doing it. But their body is not physiologically in ketogenesis. But if it does, then you have to analyze what are those ketone bodies. Have you heard of acetoacetate? That's a ketone body, one of the most common ones that are formed in those emergency situations. Ketone bodies are, by definition, advanced glycation end products, AGEs. In the long run, they only increase inflammation in the body. Just like the fat in the body is increasing inflammation too. So people who are overweight or who have too much body fat, subcutaneous fat, are going to be inflamed. Because fat is living tissue. It's not just storage for calories. It secretes its own hormones, its own immune messengers. So the more fat you have, the more inflamed your body is. And the more inflamed it is, the more it will tend to create more fat. A vicious cycle. So you need to find ways to reduce inflammation and reduce toxicity in order to also lose the excessive amount of fat. A ketogenic diet, as long as it supports the real emergency situation, it will accelerate breakdown of fat and you will lose weight. But at the same time, it might poison you and cause more inflammation. And as soon as you finish this emergency component of your life, you'll end up gaining a lot of your weight back because you're inflamed. Plus, in addition, you are causing damage to your blood vessels. The AGEs inflame your blood vessels and create coronary and other vascular diseases. Have you seen all those people with varicosities, varicose veins? Nowadays, it's very common. Almost everybody has them. Damage to the capillaries and the blood vessels.
What does that have to do with the liver?
Well, the liver is important to eliminating many of the toxins that increase the inflammation. And the liver by itself creates various compounds that are either pro or anti-inflammatory. Okay? So now you're getting a little bit of the picture why in nature you don't have much of a choice to eat one diet or another. In nature, all humans will more or less eat the same. There wouldn't be different books with different choices. You would eat what's available, wouldn't you? You wouldn't have much of a choice. And by doing that, you would be basically protecting yourself from all of those calamities I've described. Your body would be less inflamed, less toxic, and you'd be able to tolerate toxins when they do come. But today we can't do it. We simply can't do it. So we need to have clean fat, Clean fat can't come from animals. Clean fat has to come from either coconuts or from olives if it's organic, really organic, free-range olives, right? Just kidding. It has to be also,
Avocado?
it can be avocados, again, it has to be organic. Everything that is fatty must be clean if it's to enter your body. And it must not be rancid, because if it's rancid, not only it will not do its job, it will also damage your own tissue and prematurely age you. And I think that I'm pretty safe in betting that each and every one of you in the last week has been eating a lot of rancid, meaning oxidized or peroxidated polyunsaturated fatty acids, just by the sheer fact that they've been exposed to heat, light, and oxygen in the shelf even. That's why we're creating ecopolitan communities everywhere. Ecopolitan communities have various jobs. One is to educate people about the healthy lifestyle, giving them tips, simple tips to incorporate into their daily life routine. Today I gave you some broad perspectives that lead to changes in lifestyle. But in those communities, people will basically get just the simple facts that would make it easier for them to incorporate changes into their lifestyle, unless they want to know the chemistry, and then they can come to lectures or listen to lectures online. But the most important thing is to provide you with those non-rancid fats. Where do you get them today? How do you get non-rancid fats today? There are only two ways. One is to only buy fatty acids that are saturated or heavily monounsaturated. So coconut oil or olive oil or red palm oil or avocado oil, those are the only oils that will not be rancid because they are very stable to begin with. But they will not give you much of the omega-3 and omega-6 that your body needs. So, how do you get those? By eating a lot of greens. Greens are the solution. Because all greens, especially if they are not exposed to heat, if you eat greens in their raw state, you will get a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acids that come together with all the antioxidants that protect them, that stabilize them. Does that make sense? That's where you would get those polyunsaturated fatty acids. In addition to that, when you have the opportunity, you can get nuts and seeds. But nuts and seeds are double-edged swords today. They would be fine if you get them straight from the tree, still in the shell, open the shell yourself and eat them straight from the shell. They have not been exposed to light, to oxygen, and they haven't been long enough in the heat to go rancid. So that would be a natural way to eat those nuts and seeds, but who gets them nowadays like that? Where are they available? Practically nowhere, unless you have your own pecan tree. Nobody around here that I know of, right? I heard that there's one growing right on top of one of the Rockefeller Center towers. There's one pecan tree on top. Just kidding. Don't believe that kind of thing. There's nothing like that for you to eat. So you are almost forced to go to the Whole Foods store and hope to get non-rancid seeds. But good luck. Are they keeping them refrigerated all the time? They don't. So they've been exposed in those plastic bags to light, to heat, and once they're open, to oxygen. And how many of you are even keeping them in the freezer or in the refrigerator to protect them from going rancid during the month or 2 or 3 months that they are in your house? Most people keep them in their cabinet. And what's the best way to know when the fats are rancid?
You smell
They
it.
taste good.
No.
Why? No, rancid tastes terrible, except for when you roast them. When you roast them, they taste good. That's why so many of those people who sell you nuts and seeds roast the heck out of them. As long as they're roasted, you will never taste that they are totally rancid. And that's why nobody wants to give you, to sell you nuts, because as soon as you taste the rancidity, you not buy that. So they roast it for you. Now you're going to be the gullible person that you are. It's organic. It's organic pecan. It's organic nuts of any, organic almonds, organic peanuts. Sorry, for Joy, I should say organic almonds. But the dictionary said both are okay. So the roasted nuts should be never entering your body. You heard me, never. Already that destroys a big chunk of your caloric intake, doesn't it? And roasted is not even done by intention. Just putting it in the oven becomes roasted. You didn't even mean for it to happen. How many of you buy bread that has pumpkin seeds added to it? Or sesame seed? Isn't it beautiful to see those seeds embedded in the bread? Right? How common are those? Extremely common. Those seeds have been exposed to high heat as the bread was being baked. You're getting so much rancidity into your body. That's why the only bread that you should be eating is bread that has zero nuts and seeds in it. Only grains that have almost no fat in them whatsoever. That's why it should never contain soy or corn, because those contain a good amount of fat, hence soybean oil, corn oil, which are totally rancid by the time you eat them. You should never eat those high omega-6 fatty acids that come from those seed oils, because that's too much omega-6, and it's going to all be rancid anyway. But when you buy packaged foods or baked foods, they should not contain anything fatty that went into the oven with them. They should be totally starchy, like tapioca. That's okay. Tapioca is going to be starchy. Sorghum is going to be starchy. What do you call those things that people love to eat in winter?
Chestnuts?
Chestnuts. Chestnuts are a dichotomy because they're nutty, but they're starchy. They don't have much fat or protein in them. They're mostly starch. So they can really act as other types of starch, as tapioca or cassava, or yucca. You know,
Roasted
yucca.
chestnuts are okay to eat? Roasted chestnuts are okay to eat?
Roasted chestnuts are not as bad because, in terms of the fat. You know, not as bad because they don't have much fat to go rancid within them. But you don't want to roast them too much. It's better to eat, you know, you can eat them raw as well. Or you can cook them in water for low heat. They're delicious.
Yes.
They're absolutely delicious. So all of those starchy foods, even yams, sweet potatoes, even those could end up in bread or in muffins or in other types of mixes that can be baked because they have zero or almost zero fat in them, so they can't go rancid. So it's not so easy because most bakeries will like to put all type of other things in them, and you'll end up suffering. You'll end up cumulative damage to your skin, and you will no longer be able to say, I eat healthy, right? And now you understand why it has nothing to do with what diet you chose, you know, whether you are affiliated with microbiotic or this or that. All of that does not matter if you're going to have a lot of fat-soluble toxins in your body, accumulating in your subcutaneous fat, and if you're going to eat a lot of polyunsaturated unstable fatty acids have been exposed to heat, oxygen, and light, and fail to have sufficient antioxidants and phytonutrients, phytochemicals that occur with the greens that will provide you with the polyunsaturates that are stable, that are protected. Most people don't come close to how they should be on all of these. And that's why society is prematurely aging its brain and its skin at the same time. We can change all that. So I'm opening it up to questions right now. Yes.
What about cheese cravings during detox? And does cheese serve any function?
What about cheese craving? You know, you crave anything you're addicted to. So you can ask me that about alcohol too if you stop something like that, or coffee. Cheese is highly addictive. It has a lot of casein. Casein becomes caseomorphin. And because of the fermentation, there are different byproducts of fermentation that are themselves very addictive. So if you crave something that you stopped eating, it's mostly because you are going through addiction, withdrawal.
It doesn't serve any purpose in terms of providing fat during detox.
Well, of course it has fat, but it's not the kind of fat you want. It's animal fat that contains hormones, antibiotics, and various types of toxic elements. Now, speaking about the skin, I want to refine one little thing. We talked about the immune system of the skin earlier, if you recall. The number one thing that protects the immune system of the skin from sending the war, the immune war, into your body and creating an autoimmune disease is sun exposure.
Say that again, please.
Sun exposure. It's the number one element that protects your immune fights from going into the body, from the skin into the body, creating severe autoimmune diseases. The only thing that is truly effective in preventing that is sun exposure. So every day you can go in the sun, you should.
Oh, you should?
You should, but you should just not burn by, and how do you avoid burning? Simply by not using SPF products. The only people who burn use SPF products, so they stay in the sun 30 times longer than they should if it's SPF 30, or 75 times if it's SPF 75. The higher the number, the stupider we are. Because we stay in the sun so much longer that we ignore the warning signs that we would get from the UVB, which we block through the SPF product. So it's ridiculous. And all of that, plus a lot more information, is in the book that Joy has in the back, Embrace the Sun. It's an important book with 1,200 scientific references, and I wrote a whole chapter there on photonutrition, photonic nutrition, and what benefits we get by exposing our skin and our eye, our retina, to the sun every day, without which you cannot be healthy. Even if you are 100% raw foodist, vegan, keto, Paleolithic, Atkins, Buddhist, I don't care what, whoever you are, you cannot be healthy, ever, if you're missing sun exposure and photonic nutrition. Please get that book from Joy and read that chapter. Yes?
We're going to have to stop in a minute. I want to make sure that we know what the nutrient-rich program is.
The nutrient-dense fast?
Yes.
It's something that I tailor to my patients. I've been doing it for 15 years. It's my invention, so you haven't heard it anywhere else. But I had already hundreds of patients go through this in different situations. It's not for everyone, so I have to make sure that it's appropriate for each individual in terms of caloric intake and in terms of what they're going to have as a source of those calories. And basically, for the time of the fast, they have no food whatsoever. They don't eat. They only get some pre-digested medical foods, plus the appropriate supplements to support the liver and to support whatever they need support based on their clinical picture. And after 6 weeks or 8 weeks or even 3 months, and sometimes only 3 weeks, depending on the situation, usually people have many miracles happen to them that they normally don't have. Miracle that you would expect with real fast. But with real fast, you will also pay the price of brain damage and skin damage and other issues. So that's kind of in a nutshell. But I just wanted to say, before you leave, we talked about how you get those nuts and seeds that are not rancid. And I didn't answer you that, right? You're still on your toes about that? You're still at the end of your chair? That is what the communities are about. Each community around the country will have a community head that will basically organize a buying club. It will be a turnkey operation. They will know exactly what to do and how to do it because they will emulate what we are doing in Florida. And each community will have opportunity for education as well as opportunity to get non-rancid nuts and seeds that are raw, refrigerated, have arrived cold and have been refrigerated for the 2 or 3 days until the buying club meets for their monthly meetings where they get education, lectures, and so on. And then they can also avail themselves of these raw, protected nuts and seeds that they will take home and put in the fridge right away. And these will be all organic and a big, great variety that you normally don't get, like pine nuts and pistachio meats and other unique nuts that are difficult to find, organic and raw, and therefore are usually eaten rancid or roasted rancid. So that will be a very important component of helping people stay healthy and preventing their subcutaneous fat and brain from going rancid. So that's one component. Also the bakery. I have a bakery in Wisconsin that follows these principles. It's the only bakery in the country that is dedicated. It's always been 100% gluten-free, always been 100% nut-free, soy-free, corn-free, egg-free. It's 100% vegan and organic. And that is the way to avoid eating bread that is gluten-free but containing so much junk that is worse than the gluten that you're trying to avoid. So the only bakery that does it is the Green Bakery. And if you gave your email address to Joey, he'll send you the link on the postcard, a digital postcard, giving you information about the bakery, which ships nationwide.
I need to get La Casa back to so that it's open for business tomorrow. I know that there are other people that have questions, so if you want to reconvene upstairs while I try to get this back the way it needs to be, that I have no problem with that. If you're sitting in a chair, it came from upstairs, if you could carry it upstairs, that would save me from carrying about 15 chairs.
Okay.
I have one question.
Please go upstairs and you can answer any questions you want. But I've got to get this organized.
All right. Any question you want, upstairs.
You want to go upstairs?
If you want.
I'll continue.
I don't like we're using words like that as good. It's animal fat.
You have a lot of.
I enjoy in my coordination.
There's a doctor. I got
I can't figure out how to do it.
should be a doctor. I got his books. Something else we could do.
Hi.